At my daughter's condominium launch party, she picked up my late wife's pocket watch, looked at it the way you'd look at a receipt you don't need, and dropped it into the waste bin beside the bar. "Honestly, Dad," she said, and turned back to her clients. My grandson Declan was standing right there. He'd been holding my hand when she did it. He was 9 years old, and he'd watched his grandmother carry that watch in her coat pocket every single day she was alive. He made a small sound, something between a gasp and a held breath, and then went very still. I didn't say anything. I crossed the marble floor of the events space, reached into the bin past a crumpled cocktail napkin and an olive skewer, and picked it up. Wiped it on my good corduroy jacket, the one Moira bought me for our 35th anniversary. Then I found Declan, knelt down to his level, and said quietly, "Grandpa's keeping this safe tonight, don't you worry." His eyes were glassy. He nodded once, very small. That was 3 weeks before Christmas. 3 days after that party, I drove through a January sleet storm on the QEW and took the watch to Otto Vandermeer's shop on James Street North. He laid it on his workbench, examined it under the light, and then pressed a flat tool into what looked like a decorative groove along the case edge. There was a soft click. He looked up at me over his magnifying glasses. His hands had stopped moving. He said very quietly, "Lester, I think you should sit down." What Moira had hidden inside that watch would not destroy my daughter the way she feared. It would simply confirm, cleanly and without any further room for doubt, that she had already done that work herself. I am Lester Granger, 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer with the region of Hamilton, and the thing people seem to remember about me is that I don't lose my temper easily. Moira used to say I was the most patient man she'd ever met. What she didn't add, though she probably thought it, was that patience without action is just waiting. The two aren't the same thing. Moira died 17 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed in February and gone by the first week of September. She was 58 years old. We'd had 37 years together, raised one daughter, and spent the last summer of her life on the back porch of our Dundas house, watching the light shift through the maple trees in the yard. The pocket watch had been her father's. He'd brought it from the Netherlands when he immigrated in the early 60s. A plain Longines, Swiss-made, nothing flashy. Moira had carried it everywhere since he passed. When she was in the palliative care unit at Juravinsky, she kept it on the tray beside her bed. 2 weeks before the end, when the room was quiet and her voice had gone thin as paper, she took my hand and said, "That watch is for Declan, not for his mother. For Declan, on his 10th birthday. You give it to him yourself." I told her I would. "Promise me you won't let her intercept it." That stopped me. I asked her why she'd say that. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The watch holds more than time, Lester. You'll understand when it matters." She passed 8 days later. I drove home from the hospital in the early morning, sat at the kitchen table with a cup of Earl Grey I didn't drink, and tried to understand how a house with 2 people in it one day could be so completely hollow the next. I held the watch that morning, turned it over. It sounded normal, felt almost normal, except for a slight, barely perceptible heaviness I couldn't quite place. I knew that watch the way I knew my wedding ring. Something was different. I put it in the bureau drawer and told myself I'd understand later. I understand now. My daughter's party was at a rented venue near Limmeridge, a space she and her business partner had fitted out with exposed concrete and track lighting to evoke the look of the condominiums they were selling. Ash Point Residences. It was her largest development yet, and she'd spent weeks organizing the client launch. 50 or 60 people, an open bar, the local counselor working the room in a blazer. She'd asked me to come, which was unusual enough that I hadn't said no. I'd brought the watch because Declan's 10th birthday was 6 weeks away. I thought I could give it to him quietly before the speeches. I hadn't counted on her noticing. She spotted the watch when I was showing it to Declan in the corner by the windows. She came across the room. I always heard her arrivals by her heels on hard floors and held out her hand. "Let me see." I handed it over. I shouldn't have. She turned it once, the way you'd turn a stone found on the sidewalk. "That's great-grandpa's watch," Declan said softly. "Grandma had it always." She set it on the bar top, Not back in my hands, just down on the surface, and kept talking over her shoulder to a man in a suit. Then she moved, and whether her elbow caught the watch or she dropped it deliberately, the result was the same. It went into the bin. She gave it the small, satisfied nod of someone tidying a mess. Honestly, Dad, not tonight. I drove home on the QEW with the watch on the passenger seat and sleet coming sideways across the windshield. Declan's face kept returning to me. That held breath. I've seen photographs of Moira at 9 years old, and she had the same face, wide-set eyes that took everything in before deciding what to show. Back in Ancaster, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. I held the watch in both hands for a long time. That's when I felt it clearly. The weight. It wasn't heavy, just wrong. Off by a fraction. I knew that watch the way I knew every tool I'd used for 3 decades. The weight was not what it had always been. Moira, I thought. What did you put in there? Otto Vandermeer had been on James Street North for 30 years. His sign read Vandermeer and Sons, clocks, watches, antique restoration, which was slightly inaccurate because his sons had both gone into software development in Waterloo, but Otto saw no reason to update it. He was 71, Belgian-Canadian, with hands steadier than my own, and a mechanical memory that bordered on the uncanny. We'd known each other 20 years, ever since we'd met at an estate sale in Stony Creek, and ended up splitting the cost of a mantel clock like reasonable men. I set the watch on his bench and told him what had happened at the party. His expression settled into the particular stillness of a man who is very carefully not saying what he thinks. He reached for his tools. He examined it for several minutes, tapping lightly, running a fingernail along the seams, pressing against the back near the hinge. Then he found the groove. The flat tool went in. There was a quiet, precise click. The false back swung open. Inside, pressed into dark velvet, were 2 things, a small brass key and a square of folded paper. The handwriting on the paper was Moira's, the slightly looping M, the deliberate spacing, the way she always underlined the things that mattered most. The key is for the safety deposit box at TD Bank on King Street East, box 447. He'll know what it means. I looked at Otto. He was already looking at me. I told her she could trust you, he said. Years ago. She came to the shop and asked me whether it was possible to fit something inside the case without it being obvious. I thought it was sentimental. A letter for you. It wasn't for me. No, he said. I can see that. We drove to the King Street East branch on a Tuesday. The manager led us to the private viewing room. Box 447 was not a small box. Inside were 4 sealed envelopes and a file folder. The folder held a property deed. A semi-detached house on Sanford Avenue North in the Crown Point neighborhood, East Hamilton, the older part of the lower city where the streets were wide and the houses had front porches. The deed was in Moira's maiden name, Moira Eleanor Walsh, her parents' house. They'd left it to her when they passed, and she'd never transferred it into Granger. I had not known it existed. Behind the deed was an appraisal, dated the previous March. Current market value, $887,000. The first envelope held a GIC certificate from TD. Face value $165,000, matured in her maiden name with a signed transfer instruction. The second held an re-ESIP statement in Declan's name, $94,000, with Moira listed as subscriber. The third envelope was a legal document, a codicil to her will, properly drafted, signed, witnessed by 2 names I didn't recognize. Josephine Clark, the family lawyer I consulted 2 days later, would confirm that both witnesses were traceable. A nurse from the 3rd floor palliative ward at Juravinsky and the hospital chaplain. Both signatures dated 14 months before Moira passed, during the period when she was still mobile, still fully herself. The codicil was specific. The Sanford Avenue property, the GIC and the rest were to go to Declan, held in trust by me until his 25th birthday. Explicitly excluded from the general estate, not to pass through my daughter's administration as executor. I sat in that room for a long time. Otto sat across from me and said nothing. He was good at silence. Then I opened the 4th envelope. My dearest Lester. If you're reading this, then she threw away the watch. I hoped she wouldn't. I set this up the way I did because I wanted to be wrong about her, because I wanted to give her the chance to surprise me. You know I saved quietly over the years. The Sanford house was always mine, in my parents' name. and I wasn't ready to share it even with you. It felt like a private tether to them. But when I got sick, I understood what it was really for. Our daughter has become someone I don't fully recognize anymore. She isn't cruel, but she's careless with people who can't help her, and she's been careless with Declan. You've seen it, Lester. The grades she demands from a 9-year-old, the way she speaks to him when she's frustrated, the way he goes quiet and small when she walks into a room. I want him to have something that is completely his, something she cannot access, cannot leverage, cannot use, and I want you to protect it for him. If she had kept the watch, if she had treasured it the way I hoped, you'd have known she still had some of me in her. If she threw it away, then you'll know exactly what to do. I love you. I love Declan. I'm sorry I won't be there to see how he turns out. I think he's going to be wonderful. All my love, always, Moira. I folded the letter and put it back in its envelope very carefully. She was a remarkable woman, Otto said. Yes, I said, she was. Josephine Clark practiced family law above a jeweler's on Main Street West. She was direct, precise, and moved through paperwork with the focused efficiency of someone who had seen every version of this situation before. She spread the documents across her desk, read everything, and looked up. The codicil is valid, witnessed, signed, dated within the statutory window. This holds. She tapped the deed. The difficulty is that your daughter filed as executor and completed probate 6 months ago. She was required to disclose all known assets. Did she know about this property? I didn't know, I said. Whether she knew, I'm not certain. Let's find out. It took 2 weeks and a retired OPPP officer from Brantford who worked quietly and billed reasonably. What he found was that my daughter had retained an estate search firm when she filed probate. That firm's records showed they had flagged a property deed under the Walsh name, cross-referenced it against Moira Eleanor Granger née Walsh, and sent notice to my daughter's solicitor. The solicitor's office had acknowledged receipt. She'd known about Sanford Avenue for at least 4 months before she filed the final probate documents. She had not disclosed it. While the investigator was at it, he found something else. My son-in-law had opened a personal account at a credit union in Calgary 6 weeks earlier. Transfers had been moving into it from their joint TFSA, small, irregular, spaced to avoid triggering automatic review. He'd also made deposits to his sister's account in Red Deer, total transferred, just over $340,000. They were planning to leave. There was more, and this was the part that cost me a full night's sleep. Declan's school kept a student support file. An entry from the previous spring. Declan appears persistently anxious, has expressed fear of disappointing his mother, quietly cries during silent reading time approximately twice per week, flinches at sudden noises. Counselor requested parent conference. Mother did not attend. Father attended once, was polite but dismissive. Grandfather, Mr. Lester Granger, attended twice and expressed genuine concern. A second entry from September. Declan told me today that he received 91% on his science test and was frightened to go home. He said, 91 isn't good enough for my mom. I asked what she says when his marks are high. He said, she asks why they're not higher. He is 9 years old. I read that second entry 3 times. Moira had seen it. She'd seen it the way grandmothers sometimes see what parents are, either too close to notice or too invested to acknowledge. And she'd spent the last clear months of her life building a legal shelter around her grandson from a hospital bed, because she loved him and she no longer trusted her own daughter to protect him. I asked Josephine to file the codicil with the estate court. I asked her to retain everything else. Then I called my daughter and invited her for dinner. She came on a Saturday with her husband. They sat at my kitchen table with pleasant, careful expressions. The expressions of people who'd agreed on the drive over about how this conversation would go. I set the property deed on the table, then the GIC certificate, then the RESP statement. My son-in-law stared at the documents and looked at his wife. What is this? He asked. Your mother's estate had assets that weren't disclosed in probate, I said, keeping my voice even. A property on Sanford Avenue worth nearly $900,000. And another $250,000 in registered accounts, all of it intended for Declan in trust. The codicil has been filed. My daughter's expression stayed smooth. The estate search firm missed it. They didn't miss it. They flagged it and notified your solicitor. Something shifted behind her eyes, very slightly. I'd have to review the correspondence. I've already seen it. My son-in-law pushed his chair back slightly. Look, this seems like it could be sorted without litigation. We're family. I agree, I said. I'd like that. My daughter's voice went flat. What is it you actually want, Dad? I want Declan to have what his grandmother left him. I want him to stop being afraid of a 91 on a science test. I want him to be able to be 9 years old without earning it. She went still. I want you to understand what your mother saw. I didn't raise my voice. Moira had taught me, by example over 37 years, that low and steady is harder to dismiss than loud. She loved you. She spent 37 years being proud of everything you built. But she could see what you were becoming. She didn't know how to tell you. So she found another way to protect the person you were hurting. You don't know what it costs to raise a child in this economy. She documented it. His counselor documented it. You're the only one who missed it, or chose to. I'm her mother. That makes me the appropriate. She was going to move with you to Calgary, I said, and looked at my son-in-law. He went very still. The credit union account, the transfers, your sister in Red Deer. I looked at him steadily. Did she tell you about the Sanford property? He didn't answer. He looked at his wife. She didn't, I said. She was keeping it separate. Exit fund, maybe. Something in her own name that wouldn't be reachable. My daughter stood up. If you take this to court, I will make this very difficult for you. You're 63 and you live alone. People worry about men your age who become. I know, I said, but we have a recording of this conversation. We have the school records. We have the probate filing. We have the transfer history. And we have a very capable lawyer. So however difficult things become, there will also be a considerable amount of evidence. They left without finishing their coffee. I heard them on the front walk, muffled, sharp, and then their car reversing out of the driveway. I sat in my quiet kitchen. Then I called Josephine and told her to file the emergency guardianship petition. Children's Aid opened their investigation the following week. The school counselor was interviewed. Declan was assessed by a CAS child welfare specialist in a separate session. Calm, the worker told me afterward. Thoughtful. He'd said, unprompted, that he felt safer at my house than at home. The temporary placement order came through on a Thursday. I drove to his school and picked him up in the parking lot. He came out in his winter coat, with his backpack over one shoulder, and stopped when he saw me standing by the car. Am I coming with you, Grandpa? For now, yes. He walked over and took my hand without another word. We walked to the car. He was quiet until we were on the highway, and then he said, Did Grandma know I might need to stay with you? I thought about a woman in a hospital room, choosing every word carefully, folding a letter into an envelope, pressing it into velvet, trusting a pocket watch to carry it until the right moment. Yes, I said, she planned for it. He looked out the window at the January fields. She was really smart. The smartest person I ever knew. The estate court proceedings took 2 months. The probate matter is still working its way through, but Josephine tells me it will likely settle. The RSPEP, the GIC, the house on Sanford Avenue, all of it transferred cleanly into Declan's trust. The permanent guardianship order came through in March, just before the snow gave up on us for the year. My daughter has supervised visits on alternating Saturdays. She's attending a parenting program, which the court required. My son-in-law is dealing with separate consequences. The financial irregularities surfaced in the process, and that has its own timeline. I drove to Otto's shop the day the guardianship order was signed. He made espresso on a small machine he kept behind the bench and handed me a cup without asking whether I wanted one. Moira will be satisfied, he said. I hope so. He handed me the watch across the workbench. He'd serviced it while I was busy with everything else, cleaned the movement, replaced the worn crown. The escapement is beautiful, he said. Someone wound it faithfully for 60 years. Every Sunday night, I said, without fail. I took it home and set it on the mantelpiece in the front room where Declan would see it every morning coming downstairs. He's been with me 4 months now. He slept badly the first 2 weeks, would come padding down the hall at 2 in the morning and stand in the doorway, and I'd tell him to come in, and he'd take the chair by the window under the spare blanket. By the third week, the nighttime trips stopped. By the second month, he was sleeping until 7. He eats breakfast without asking permission first. He leaves his shoes in the middle of the hall the way boys leave shoes, and I step over them, and that's just how it is. He likes trains. He has a collection of replica locomotives lined up on the windowsill of his room, each one facing the same direction, and he likes facts the way some kids like video games, with complete absorption. Last Tuesday, he told me at breakfast, over toast, that the Canadian Pacific Railway was completed in 1885, and the last spike was driven at Craigellachie, British Columbia, by a man named Donald Smith, who later became Lord Strathcona. He said this the way children offer information they're proud of, as a gift, no strings attached. I told him I hadn't known that. He looked very pleased. I wind the watch every Sunday night now, Moira's routine, carried forward. Some mornings Declan stands in front of the mantelpiece before school, hands behind his back, just looking at it. He doesn't touch it, he knows it's his eventually, and he seems to understand that eventually is worth waiting for. One morning he asked me why great-grandpa had brought it all the way from the Netherlands. I told him I didn't know the full story, only that some things travel a long way to end up exactly where they're supposed to be. He thought about that for a moment, in the quiet, complete way he thinks about things. Like me, he said. Like you, I said. I don't tell this story to settle anything. My daughter is my daughter, and I'm not finished trying to find a way through to her. I tell it because Moira spent the last clear months of her life protecting a child she would never see grow up, and she did it with nothing but patience and planning, and a pocket watch that nobody at that party thought was worth keeping. She knew something I'm still learning, that love, the kind that lasts, doesn't announce itself. It measures twice. It finds a locksmith. It folds a letter into velvet and trusts that the right person will come along and know what to do. I'm trying to be that person, every morning, every Sunday winding, every train fact over toast. Some days trying is more than enough.